Priorities Business Process Manager, or BPM, lets you define statuses for documents, as well as the rules that apply to them, and authorize status sequences in the form of paths or workflows. As an integral part of the application itself, BPM allows you to manage to-do lists for individual users as well as for the entire organization. Each major document in a defined work process has its own flowchart. The first time you open each chart, it will display the default statuses predefined for that particular document. In this demo, we will see an example of how you can use this tool to work with a price quote. Before you begin, it's a good idea to formulate in writing the actions that you want to implement for the BPM. In this example, I, Marcy, generate price quotes that Pete, my regional manager, has to approve. I want to set up a rule so that when I change a quote status to ready, it will automatically be assigned to Pete and will appear in his to-do list. In addition, I want to set up an automatic email notification which will be sent to Pete to ensure that he is notified as soon as any particularly large quotes are ready for his approval. I also want to make sure that I'm notified as soon as Pete assigns such a quote back to me. So let's go to the Sales menu, Price Quotations, and open the BPM flowchart for customer quotes. As you can see, the tools available in the lower left-hand corner tool tray have changed to be specific to the flowchart, as are the commands in the Edit menu in the top bar. As we will see in just a moment, many of the same commands are also available in the right-click menu. Let's begin with the statuses. As you can see, there are currently 5 default statuses. Each BPM flowchart has a default initial status, usually draft, that is predefined. The box representing this status is easily identified by its sharp corners and dotted border. If we right-click on this status, we can see that it is currently flagged as a permitted initial status and as the default initial status. This is the status that is assigned to any newly opened document. In addition, as we'll see in a moment, you can define any number of statuses as a permitted initial status. As a result, when users open a new document, even though a default status appears, they can change it to any permitted status without having to leave and re-enter the line. Let's add a new status. Right-click an empty space in the flowchart, select Add Status, and then click the desired location in the work area. In the dialog box, we're going to call this status Pending. And one of the properties that we will set will be to include it in the to-do list. Notice that a box representing the new status has been added to the flowchart and that its corners are rounded. Let's right-click on the pending status and set it as the initial status. So first we need to flag it as a permitted initial status. Notice that the corners are now sharp rather than rounded. We can then right-click a second time and flag it as a default initial status. As you can see, this status now has a dotted border, while the borders of the draft status are now solid lines. Let's right-click again to set the status color to orange. And we'll right-click one last time to record a remark for this status. This remark appears as a tooltip whenever you place the cursor near the pending status. We can add more new statuses as needed by clicking the Add Status icon in the tool tray, or by selecting Add Status from the upper Edit menu. We also want to make sure that quotes with the ready status appear in the assigned user's to-do list. So let's right-click the status, and open the Properties dialog box. And next we'll just flag the Including To-Do List property and click OK. Now we can link the statuses together and define a workflow sequence by means of paths, which determine the available options for moving a price quote from one status to another. Let's right-click an empty space in the flowchart and select Draw Path. Place the cursor at the bottom of the pending status, keep the left mouse button pressed, and draw a line to the ready status, which is the one you want to link it to. Release the mouse button. We can set up additional paths for price quote statuses by clicking the Draw Path icon in the tool tray, or by selecting Draw Path from the upper Edit menu. Let's draw another path from pending to cancelled, a path from draft to pending, two paths from the ready status, one to the order placed, and one to the cancelled status, and two paths from the order placed status, one to the sent status, and one to the cancelled status. The paths we have just defined, which are represented by arrows in the flowchart, reflect the order in which a price quote is to be processed. While working in the BPM, we recommend that you select the Disable Path Definitions command in the Edit menu in order to temporarily disable the paths between statuses in the form in which you are working, though existing properties and rules will remain in effect. This is useful when you are editing an existing flowchart for a form that is in daily use, and your work may cause difficulties for those using the form in question. Now we're ready to set up rules that activate system responses when certain conditions are met. Rules can be set both for the status itself and for the paths. Path rules allow you to assign specific events to a given status, but only when it is reached from a specific preceding status. Path rules also allow you to designate which users or groups of users are permitted to move a document from one particular status to another. Let's start by defining a couple of rules for the path we just drew from the pending status to the ready status. We're going to use these rules to determine which users can move a pending price quote to the ready status and to assign price quotes to the regional manager when they move from the pending status to the ready status. So we'll just right-click on the path and open the Define Rules dialog box. First, we'll indicate that only users in the sales group are allowed to move price quotes from the pending status to the ready status. Click OK. Note that the path is now marked with a red circle, indicating that only certain users are allowed to move price quotes from the pending status to the ready status. Let's right-click the path a second time to define our next rule. Since a rule already exists for this path, a List of Rules dialog box opens. Click New to define a new rule. When a price quote moves from pending to ready, we are going to assign it to a different user, namely to Pete, the regional manager. Now we click OK. Once we save this BPM flowchart, the rule is in effect. Similarly, you can define rules for the statuses themselves, rather than the path between statuses. So, for example, if a price quote with a ready status is particularly large, I want to make sure that Pete is notified as soon as the quote is assigned to him. In addition, I want to make sure that I am notified as soon as Pete assigns the quote back to me. So let's set up a rule for the ready status, which will send email notification if a quote's final price exceeds, say, $1,000, and if the assigned user changes. So let's right-click on the Ready status and open the Define Rules dialog box. Now, when do we want this rule to be applied? When a price quote reaches the Ready status. And what we want to do is, we want to send an email to whomever appears in the Assigned To form column. So we're going to select Send Email in the first text box, Form column in the next text box, and then we're going to choose the Assigned To column. Now let's set up the content of this email. First, we'll give it a subject. Quote number so and so needs your attention. So in the subject field, let's type quote number and then click Add Field and choose the price quotation column title from the Choose list under the message area. And then we'll finish the sentence, needs your attention. And in the message, we're going to say, please review quote number and then click Add Field and choose the price quotation column title from the Choose list under the message area. The quote number will show up in the email itself as a link to the record in question. Continue the sentence as soon as possible so that it can be sent by then click Add Field and choose the Send Quote Before column title from the Choose list under the message area. And now we'll just finish the sentence with a period. We can also attach a document to the email, for instance, a copy of the price quote itself, created using a designated print format. Now we only want to send email notifications if the price quote is especially large, so we can have the system notify the assigned user only if, let's say, the quote's final price is greater than $1,000. We're also going to define a second condition for the rule to ensure that this email is only sent when the quote is first reassigned to a different user. Otherwise, an email will be sent each time a large quote with a ready status is modified, no matter what changes are made to the quote. To do that, we're going to say that the rule applies only if the previous value of the assigned to column differs from its current value. Now, in order to indicate the current value in this field, we're going to make use of a function expression. So we're going to click the function icon, and in the expression dialog box, we'll click Add Field to Condition and choose the assigned to column again. And then we'll click OK to add this function expression to the condition we just defined. We can also define a rule that takes into account a date appearing in the price quote. For example, we can set up an email reminder that will be sent if the quote remains at the ready status past the date when it was supposed to be sent. So once again, we are going to right-click the ready status. Since a rule already exists for this status, a list of rules dialog box opens. Let's copy our first rule and then edit it. In the When section, select the third option. Select Send Quote Before in the first text box, Fail in the second text box, then 1 and days in the third and fourth. In the next section, we'll select User in the second text box and My Username in the third. Let's change the subject to say Delayed Processing of Price Quote Number and we leave the field with the quote number as is. In the message area, we'll just change the message to say quote number so-and-so was supposed to be sent by and we'll leave both fields as is. We'll complete the sentence with a period and finish by saying, please send the quote ASAP and then change its status to sent. Now we'll click OK. So now there are 2 rules for this particular status, but of course we can define many more. In fact, there may be many such conditions defined for each status, some of which may occur simultaneously. In the current example, if the quote is delayed by 1 day when its assigned user is changed, we really only need to send one email, the one we just defined. In the List of Rules dialog box, we can use the up and down arrows on the right-hand side of the dialog box to determine the precedence of each rule. If we want to disable, but not delete a particular rule, for either status or a path, we can go into the rule itself and uncheck the active option in the upper left-hand corner of the Define Rules dialog box. We can then simply replace the check mark when we're ready to reactivate the rule. Note that time-based rules will only function if the Tabula Task Scheduler is running and has been set up properly by the System Manager. Additional details regarding the scheduler, as well as basic instructions for setting it up, can be downloaded from the Ashbel website. In order to keep your flowchart easily comprehensible, special care must be taken in both the color coding of statuses and in their physical grouping. So, for example, we can set the color of the pending status as orange and ready will be blue. You can also print out a flowchart from the Charts toolbar if desired, including the definitions and rules for each status. Let's take a look at how these rules actually function when working with a price quote. So we're going to open the to-do list, where we can see a price quote that I opened yesterday, which currently has the draft status. We're going to change its status to pending directly from the to-do list. And then we're going to use F6 to move to the Price Quotations for Customers form, where we will record a date in the Send Before column, and then assign this quote the Ready status. Note that the quote is now assigned to Pete. Since this is a relatively large quote, I can also see the email notification that has been sent in my personal Outlook Sent Items folder. This enables me to verify that the quote has actually been sent to Pete for approval. When Pete receives the email notification, he can either click through from the mail message in Outlook directly to the price quote, or he can simply open his to-do list. Let's just quickly look at one last related item in priority. Let's say that Pete finds an issue with the price quote that he wants me to respond to. He can simply enter the internal dialog sublevel form and describe the issue there. When he is done, he returns to the upper level form and changes the value of the Assigned To column to Hadass. As a result, an email notification will be sent to me and the price quote will be posted back in my to-do list. When I receive the email, I can check the internal dialog sublevel form to see Pete's comments, make any required changes, and assign the quote back to Pete for his final approval. In other words, there are 2 different operations that can trigger an automatic email, changing the quote status and changing the assigned user. This concludes our explanation of Priorities BPM tool.